It is my great pleasure to introduce Lucien Vittal, who is coming to us from GameDesk at USC, where he is the executive director. And Lucien has had over 12 years of experience managing game design projects and large projects from up to $2 million. And over 16 of them, and has done a lot of research and development in this area of game design for clients such as Lockheed Martin, Sandia Labs, the NIH, and the NSF. And he's the co-founder of the USC Computer Science program in game development, and served as the associate director for games research at USC, and was also, or is also, a faculty member there. And he just told me that they're about to start a new school at, in LA at USC, and a game center is affiliated with that I hope he will tell us about. And we're very excited to have him here. Lucien?
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with a video that kind of shows who we are and what we're doing, and a lot of the kids working with some of our technologies and our curriculum. And it's a good way to start, so let's start there. We're serious about learning. There's something really wonderful about how these new technologies and games can engage youth. And we really want to see how that wonder can lead to serious learning. We do this by building technology and games that kids really enjoy. We've created a culture that allows teachers to work with students in ways that they never thought they could before.
The GameDesk class allows us to create the game, not just, hey, I did a game and it's cool, it's I was able to create a game that is cool.
Anytime you give students an opportunity to interact with technology, you can't help but to see learning increase.
We look at other fantastic work that's out there on the iPad, on the PC, new technologies that can be used in the classroom, and we help teachers use them effectively as tools for learning.
We've found a way to engage our students cognitively, and we've seen very encouraging results.
So I wanted to make my grasshopper jump naturally. By using the quadratic formula, I can determine the vertex and which angle it's jumping to.
What might that represent?
The number of atoms to make the molecule.
Okay.
The question is, how do we do all this? Who are we? We are a group of scientists, artists, developers, programmers, thinkers that all come together to transform these technologies into real tools for learning.
Working with GameDesk is great. It's an exciting time because we're trying to use the most modern tools to teach fundamental ideas in science.
I eventually learned some new stuff about math, like, oh, this is cool.
I never thought that I could make a video game. Thanks to MathMaker, it's very easy.
What I love about GameDesk is they make games that make learning fun.
Up until now, we've only been able to support schools locally. With this new AT&T collaboration, we're going to change that. We are going to create a new learning hub, a living learning laboratory, where research, development, and assessment of the most promising practices and products can be experienced every day from all around the local community. We're going to then capture what's happening at this hub and take it out even further to a new national portal for teachers, students, and parents that will comprise the best of the work we develop and curate from around the world. So that kind of takes you through the, the company and where we're heading. And I want to talk a little bit about sort of the driving philosophy of of how we think about what we do, what kind of drives every project. And this is an interesting definition of education, the idea that education is forming a mental model of the world. We're born, we start taking information in, and based on our experiences, we form this mental model. Whether you agree with this definition or not, it's helpful for us to frame how we think. And so here we see my grandfather's generation, my granddad. He grew up in Benton, Louisiana, and what he would say is that school, for him, school was the largest portal of learning. It was the one place that he went to where he was able to get the deepest and most broadest education. He wasn't raised by educated parents, but if he was, that would have been another portal. If he was an avid reader, that would have been another portal. If he was a natural explorer, that would have been another portal. And of course, my generation, we see television, video games, early online experiences. And of course, today's generation is extremely different. Multimodal, multiple forms of discourse, happening in all forms of technology. And not only are they receiving it, but they're creating it. So we moved into a participatory society where Kids are remixing their own media, creating their own games, shooting their own films. Practically every iPhone is a camera and a camera at some level. So all this is happening on a global level. We're at a global stage. Global stage for when I was in high school was a Russian pin pile. That's about as far as it went. So what's interesting about this is that's our world, but the one thing that used to be this largest portal is not necessarily reflective of this pervasive world of technology and different forms of discourse. So the question is, how do we make schools reflective of this box? You know, formal education is still this agreement that we have as a society, this one box that for the most part, most people go through. And we can do whatever we want with this box because kids go through it and we shape what their experience is. And this is not just a one-directional idea. So it's not just how do we infuse these technologies into education, but also what is it about what we know kids should learn, the wisdom of the elders that infuses what we think is important for kids to know. How can that actually go back and feed back to the market and inform market practice? So GameDesk has been trying to do that at lots of different levels. We look at immersive experiences, hard to understand sciences. Most of our work focuses on 6th to 12th grade content, where the sciences start getting more abstract, the math starts getting more abstract. So we look at mobile devices, emotional intelligence, also kids building and making. And who we are is a big part of why I think we have a really good time and we're making a mark in this area. And that is, if you were to come hang out with us any day, you'd see a group of scientists, you'd see a group of artists, you'd see some teachers all working together. And that's sort of what I was seeing at the university level was missing, is that there wasn't near enough collaboration amongst all of these 3 central partners. So I'm going to skip kind of who we are, but I can say that we started out of core research, and about 4 years ago we had a bunch of teachers from Jordan High School in Watts, 0% proficiency rates in math, 1% proficiency rate in science, and they came and they played our games and they looked at our research, and we all went out for drinks, and they basically started saying kind of how they really felt, which was that it was cool what we were doing, but it was clear that we weren't really making any mark, and it was mostly research focused. And so we thought, well, could we do a volunteer program where we just get some academics and folks who are really interested in this area and try to do some summer work? And it became the GameDesk project, and it just naturally formed into its own institute. Again, focusing mostly on with at-risk kids, looking also how do we create the type of polish that is accepted in the regular market. And then let me take you on a little journey through some of these experiences to sort of show you our thinking, our approach. I would say that there are a lot of folks doing really fascinating work out there. If we had a particular area that we focused on, it would be conceptual learning. A lot of our products and projects focus on big ideas. How do things look? How are they connected? And so here you see constant velocity. And also we focus on creating meaning or utility. How can something be meaningful? So normally in constant velocity, you're presented with the equation. There's the traditional ramp exercise that you do in the lab. But if now have systems that can actually track, why not form slope by moving?
So see, every time the clock cycles, we plot a point, right?
What's the velocity? The position and the time consistent on both sides.
Yeah, I think you spoke about it too, this idea of the slope too, the direction. So is this positive or negative velocity?
Because it's sloping up, right?
So what I want you to do is try and make an equation. Get set, go.
So in this way, we move, and what we call this science attunement. How can, in an embodied way, can we attune to the concepts? Another example of that is, let's skip through the metrics here. If you guys want to ask me about, we do assessment around most of everything that we do, and I can talk about all of those assessments. I'm going to kind of focus on the concepts here. Another project that we started a year ago, where we were challenged by Bill Nye the Science Guy to try to pick a curriculum that was historically very difficult to communicate even at the high school level, and see if by virtue of games mechanics, and simulation, we could not actually create a better vehicle for understanding a complex process. So if you think about, if you were to Google aeronautics or aerodynamics, you'd get something like this. It might be a plane. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at what is fundamentally a two-dimensional knowledge representation of an extremely dynamic 3D experience. And so here we can see gravity, lift, thrust, and drag. And what we don't see here is a sense of how it all works together, and fundamentally how it works in reality. And so we built a game. What better way to understand aerodynamics than to become a bird? And so in this game, you play through a series of levels, and you learn each force throughout each level. So the first thing you learn is gravity. You learn that without wings, you start out, you become a wingless bird, and you're falling. And you realize that gravity is constant. You realize that no matter what direction that you fly, gravity is always facing towards the center of the Earth. And then you start realizing that there are these other forces that are allowing you to fly. And so here's a little bit of a demo here. We can see that every time the bird flaps, it generates thrust. We can see that gravity is always facing down. And we can see as we increase our lift on one wing or the other, we either bank, turn. We can turn if we shift our center of gravity. As we can see here, the center of gravity is shifted. And so we built this version in two types of vehicles. One is a standalone that has pop-up instruction, and the other is a system that's designed to work with teachers. So in what ways can a teacher facilitate knowledge, prompt, and ask the right questions? This is another big area of our research, which is teacher use, teacher facilitation. What do teachers do with these games? When can they work with large groups? When do they work with one-on-one? What are the best ways to pull out knowledge from these types of experiences? We also started to do a road show where we worked with Dyson, and we built these Dyson fans that are connected to the simulation, wind simulation in the game. And so we see a little bit of that at the recent USA Engineering Festival. And the challenge here was, could we actually truly get really close to a true sensation of flight?
What does it take for a bird to fly? What does a bird need to fly? Today we're going to learn about the invisible forces that you can't see that enable our bird to fly. I want you to spread your wings. So I want to see those wings out. There's air everywhere. It's like a fluid through which you're swimming with fins, but your wings are your fins. And particles of air are streaming at you and hitting these wings.
So you're basically just catching the air under your wings, and then if you tilt forward, you're catching it on top of your wings. That makes you go up, makes you go down.
What's going to happen when I drop this apple? Oh, it falls. Why did our apple fall to the ground? Gravity, that's absolutely right. Gravity is one of these invisible forces that you can't see.
So we use this roadshow to also figure out what are those facilitations, what are the natural things that you can say to a student to pull out that knowledge.
Takes you up. So the wind is hitting her wings, and as she tips her wings back, tip, 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 let's see those thumbs. The bird goes up under the force of lift, which is counteracting gravity.
I think kids today like more hands-on, so they like to play things, they like to figure out how things work. As they were teaching him the lessons on, I think it was about lift, that he was able to kind of manipulate the wings on the simulation to kind of simulate lift as well.
Now how's our bird going to get its speed? And I want to see you run. There we go. You're running, very good. Flap those wings, you can get off the ground.
So we also, you start out the game by getting a jetpack, because it's really hard to be a bird, so it's kind of the training wheels that help you start out. So that gives you a sense of all the different ways that we can take a particular learning experience. So a standalone iPad to a full immersive experience, or something that could work on the Kinect. A new project also, another interesting thing to think about is geoscience. Geoscience happens over billions of years. It's happening all around us, but it's hard to see. But with a game and simulation, you can leverage these types of mechanics and the ability to make the invisible visible. And so that's what we're doing now. And this is our largest project to date. We're going to be looking at embedded all 6th grade planetary and geoscience standards and try to create a single experience that would be equivalent to that set of instruction. And this is actually the first time we're showing some of the early work. So the idea is that we call it Fantasia in space. So the idea is that you accrete your own gases, you form your own asteroids, you smash them together, and based on the elements that they contain, you form different types of planets. So if you build something further out from the sun and it has particular types of elements, you can form a gas giant or an Earth-like planet. And in this way, it becomes a big sandbox, but a contextualized, conceptual sandbox that reinforces the big ideas. And we believe that that's a big part about gaining long-term STEM engagement. If you really feel that you have a relationship with this world and have a really good sense of how the whole thing works, then it might be something that you really continue and build a passion around. So as a final example here, this is something we learned through going through this process called evidence-centered design. Jan incorporates that into his research. We incorporate it into ours. There's some other fantastic work being done by Val Schut. And that has really helped us extract what was not apparent from the Common Core standards, from the state standards. One of the things that we realized when we did thermal energy and measurement is that we found that a lot of the kids, if you ask them about measurement, they would say, well, I understand centimeters, I understand meters, I understand Fahrenheit, I understand Celsius, I can tell you what they are, and I can perhaps convert. But if you were to get them to try and articulate the idea, the fundamental idea that measurement is something we as human beings have created ourselves to better understand the universe, it is a form that allows us to understand it more, to get a sense of how it works. It's something that is not immediately apparent to them. And so that changed the way we designed this to where when they build their robot, before they get to Celsius or Fahrenheit, they build degrees Robert. They build degrees Susie. And that way, it looks like degrees Robert here, he created one that was 23 on the high, 1 on the low, so the freezing point, the boiling point, I think the melting point of chocolate, and the freezing point of ice cream. But this scale, Robert quickly found that it's very hard to measure other things with a scale of that kind. And so in that way, they're able to intuit and develop a sense of what might be a more manageable scale. And then as they understand the progression from Fahrenheit to Celsius to Kelvin, it becomes a very human story, a very logical story. And that's a different way of thinking about it. If you think about history, there's an amazing way to think about history where if you look at history as systems and cultures and societies and ways in which we have, over time, rethought our systems as a civilization, we really think about times when we live in our lives currently where that might come into play. Now, we do that maybe if that's our profession, if we're an avid role player. But the one place that happens quite a lot, if you recall, is it happens a lot when you're young. So if you think about it, when we're young, we're constantly modeling what we see in society. We're building doll houses, we're creating kingdoms, we're looking at financial systems, but then something happens. We kind of stop. And why? Why do we do that? So in the new school that we're launching, we're building a whole ancient inventions curriculum that helps kids rebuild inventions through time to get a sense of what that's like. And also, we're going to take advantage of this phenomenon happening in Second Life where people are trying to recreate historical civilizations. So we're going to have teams of kids building out what they come to understand. And this is one of our processes called learning through translation, which is essentially what we do when we create games. We are translators. We are taking knowledge from one medium and converting it into another. We're looking at the textbook, we're looking at the lecture, and we're creating an interactive experience. So what happens if a kid does that? Wouldn't they learn? I didn't know anything about air. I knew very little about aerodynamics when I first started the aerodynamics project. I'd say that I know a good amount now. And what happens when you're put in a position to create is you are forced to grapple with the concepts. You're forced to be in a position to understand, right? So that's what we're going to take advantage of. You guys probably saw the project on Dojo yesterday, perhaps, looking at emotional intelligence. Only way to beat the game is by chilling out. Detection of pulse and skin conductance. And so thinking about creating, this is sort of our first original project, this is the project that started us. This was kids learning through building games, and we evolved it into kids learning math through building games. So what we did is we embedded Common Core math standards inside the process of designing, developing, and evolving game design over time. And so this shows you kind of what the kids are doing.
Resolution, but the same, what?
There we go.
Look at that.
Okay. Well, so far I am making my dinosaur game. So that's my dinosaur. So if it were to collide with the wall, it would stop. That's where it just lands.
Hey Brandon, what you working on?
I'm working on my game. I think sooner or later I have to put in some high score system where like the players will compete against their scores.
Like a score attack?
Yeah.
So I wanted to make my grasshopper jump naturally, so I want him to know like how far and how high you're supposed to jump. For me to know how the grasshopper should jump, I have to know the quadratic formula. The first point of the parabola is the starting point. The second x is the second point of the parabola, meaning which is the vertex, and the third point of the parabola is where it lands. So by using the quadratic formula, I can determine the vertex and which angle it's jumping to.
So that kind of gives you a sense. Right now we have 16 core processes and standards that are embedded through the process. We're going to do another year of this development and create a very modular program so that lots of teachers can use it in lots of different contexts. What we found right away was that certain teachers wanted to use it for 1 week intervention. Some teachers want to use it as a math adjunct. Some schools want to use it as a 12-week after-school program. Some folks want to build classes out of it. So we need to create something that is agile and works for lots of different teachers in lots of different contexts. So on average, we see 20% increases on pre-post tests pulled from the California State around each of these areas, even as short as 1 week durations. We also we see an increase in math interest, so we see a lot of students re-engaging. We also did an evaluation to track students who were also in the other math courses and to get responses from those teachers and how they were changing in their behavior, and we were seeing an increase in interest and efficacy as well there. Okay. The sort of the holy grail of where we want to take this in the next year is really focusing on higher order learning. Now that we know the kids can build the games, how can we get them to re-synthesize their knowledge, right? Basically core engineering practice. And so what we're doing now is we're building a scaffolded series of modules. And the idea is that you build game 1, you learn fractions, conversions, and ratios. You build game 2, you learn fractions, slope, y-intercept, relative distance, on, and each game kind of highlights these concepts. And then the idea is that you have a culminating project, and we're going to have kids build an Angry Birds clone, because all the kids want to build Angry Birds. And the idea is that they're going to be put in a position and realize that everything that they've learned, everything that they understand, is all they really need to build that Angry Birds. So we're going to give them the assets and some facilitation, but we want to create a way in which kids can basically build this from their prior knowledge. We started doing assessment around a lot of third-party apps. This is one we did on Motion Math. I don't know if you guys have played that. I highly recommend you do. This is a traditional cross-experimental design, regular practice to the halfway point, digital, and then switch. It helps remove some of the outliers or the alternative explanations for why they improved in that way. And then I'm going to finish the talk and talk about our school and where we're going with our center and kind of how we came to that. So I love this quote from Einstein, which is, "I never teach my pupils, I only attempt to provide conditions in which they learn." I really believe that. I believe that's the one great thing about still a formalized education, because we can shape this box, as I mentioned before, and create these conditions. And so this is an interesting idea. Let's just read this for a second. "A great game designer creates a series of meaningful experiences where players constantly engage and compelled to consistently overcome all the cognitive challenges within the game." So you guys probably saw Jesse Schell's presentation, and he talked about his deck. I love that deck. What we did is we gave it to all of our teachers, and one of the things that we kind of realized in a little experiment we played is what would it be if we, every instance of the word game, we replaced it with school, and every instance of player, we replaced it with student. And how would that inform the way a teacher actually thought about how they design their classroom? And so we did that, and we basically took the art of game design, and we took a bunch of teachers, and we do this, I think we do this once a week now with lots of different groups of teachers. And if you were to even take one of these lenses, right, and look at these items down here. What in my game, what is there in my game that players can relate to? What else can I add? So what is it in my educational experience and my activities that my students can relate to? Now, all this seems fairly straightforward and obvious, but I can tell you that this completely reshifts their approach in the morning when they develop curriculum. It reshifts kind of their thinking. It kind of aligns to trying to create a particular relationship with the student, and we've found it very effective. So we're launching this new school. It's pretty out there. It's a modular-based school. We call it Choose Your Own Adventure model. It's interest-driven. Most of the modules are focused on making, interacting, or playing. And we're completely rethinking the space. I'm often inspired of what's happening around the world. We're building a little mini warehouse, we're inspired by Mythbusters warehouse. So a whole little maker's warehouse. Kids can go and try and build things. We're really inspired by the makers movement. Also D-Lab in Stanford, this whole idea of a big idea space for kids. This is another big inspiration. Minnesota Charter got so fed up with sort of how they were doing things, they gutted out their school and turned it into a Google startup environment. It's pretty amazing. And this notion that kids who are constantly researching and learning have this sense of marvel and discovery around these things that they're doing. There's a lot to learn here. And this is kind of how we're taking the curriculum. This is, a traditional trajectory, a linear trajectory. This is our trajectory. It's a little crazier. I call it the summer camp model. So when you were in summer camp, you'd go to this booth, that booth, you do knot tying. And so if you were to look at this, maybe you say, well, where's English, where's math, where's physics? It's all there. The standards are there, the Common Core is there. But you take cooking with thermal energy. You take learning math through programming your robot. And so we're spending the whole summer finishing this curriculum, and we're going to be launching 6th grade. And that also takes us to this realization that when we were funded last year to design this school, we became something we didn't anticipate, because we quickly realized that it was going to take us a very long time to build all this curriculum ourselves, and we didn't want to do that anyway. So we became this vetting curation house because we had to. We had to find out, where's all the cool making stuff? Where's all the great game stuff? How do you use it? What stuff has great potential but just needs a little bit more teacher wraparound in order to make it effective? And so that's what we did. And then we realized that we had done all this work, and it was basically going to benefit 3 teachers and 65 kids. And that's not much of an impact. So we were wondering, is there a way that we can create a window so that lots of folks, other than me going on giving presentations, a lot of people can learn about what we're doing and try it themselves. And so we needed to figure out a solution. And the solution is a new hub portal solution. So we're launching a new physical space where we're going to create, the first floor will be what we call the School of the Future. It's a place to figure out what a school can be without the constraints of the politics or anything that would sort of be in the way of doing something in a vacuum and just trying things out. And so the way we think about this is that we have our research group, we have our experimental lab, and everything we figure out there gets put on a regular calendar. We're funded to have kids from all over LA come to the center every day and figure out how this works. And so this is kind of the final vision and of what we're doing, and that is that we have the school. Everything that we learn from the school gets incorporated into the daily calendar. Everything we learn in our individual research modules from our daily calendar gets integrated and figure out how do you scaffold it across a curriculum. And then all of these processes are captured in both documentation and video, and then put to a place where other people can see it. What's it like to use this app in the classroom? What's this teacher doing with it? What's that teacher doing with it? What is it like to teach with the Connect? What is it like to teach with the cloud? And so that's where we're heading. And in that way, that everything we learn makes a larger impact. And so the idea is whether you're let's say you're a teacher in Kansas and you have the crappiest computers in the district, something like MathMaker, which we designed it to work on computers that were very old. So you'd find that there were apps from us and other third-party providers that would be suited for your outcomes, what you're looking to do in your classroom. And of course, it would have videos from the hub showing what teachers are doing, some toolboxes that might give you a good start, and then an opportunity to give feedback back. So it's not just what we're creating a window to, it's creating a window to what everybody's doing. And so we hope that this will become a great platform for creating a positive discourse in this area. Thank you for your time. Any questions? Yeah, sorry. Yes. Yeah.
What are the criteria that you look for? Because it would seem that with different developers, they might be marching to multiple tunes of different drummers.
Absolutely. I mean, we can't certainly get our head around, every developer's approach. I mean, one of the things that I'd say immediately, we have a template that basically looks at what can this system run on? Is there any assessment data around it currently? How fresh is it? Is it something that can act as a standalone? We do immediate teacher trials. That is like maybe the video that you saw earlier, where we get a whole group of teachers to try to teach to it, and we do these rapid fire sessions. And then we document that, and then we use that to create sort of a taxonomy that informs the rest of the template. Because from that intuitive use, you start extracting what the learning outcomes are, you get a sense of what best practices might be, and then from that you can kind of get an outline of what really this experience is. And so that's currently our method. We're evolving the method over the year, and that's a big part of this new project, is to figure out all the ways that we could curate various forms of apps and games.
And everything that you're looking at, is it based on the California standards?
Well, I'd say previously, in terms of math, anything that has Common Core, we go to the Common Core. For the school that we were building, obviously we were looking at California State. Since we've decided to do this larger platform, that has changed, and so we're now looking at lots of the different standards across various states. Also, we have these we call them micro hubs, and they're schools that have basically signed on to take on a healthy portion of these types of activities, and so we're focusing on those schools first, and if they're in a particular state, we look at those standards.
I really like the idea of doing this careful iteration and documentation. It feels a lot like what John Dewey would have done if he wanted to make a lab school with games. Where it seems to me you're going to run into a lot of trouble is while that kind of iteration and the kind of design documentation you're talking about providing seems like it'll be really useful to other designers, a lot of projects have tried to use model schools or proof of concept schools to really inspire change in other organizations, and oftentimes one of the things it really comes up against is workflow of the teachers and the administrators in other kinds of schools. Have you given any thought to how to how or when or why professional educators would actually engage this project at a distance, other than, gee, I'd like to see what it's like to use a Kinect. I mean, when does somebody go and find out? When do they try something out? When do they talk to you?
Well, we're trying to get avoiding the when do they talk to us point. We hope that the portal provides a quick, intuitive sense of how they can immediately start using it. You know, we have 12 pilot schools in LA, and we have different relationships with each of those schools. But at the same time, we have multiple teachers doing this type of work throughout Los Angeles. And for us, it's always been a bottom-up approach. The teachers traditionally come to us. We were at CCSA conference recently, and we had 395 teachers who wanted to become immediate adopters and agreed to download videos and try something. So I think the real interest is there. In terms of how it works in each school and the restrictions of that school, you know, there's not much we can do about that. All we can do is create an easier way into this. And I think that's still a substantial step forward.
Wow. What is your plan for the school as far as how long is it currently slated to last? Is it just this first year and you're going to see how it works and then move forward there, or?
Sure, so we're launching 6, and then 7, 8, and then 8, 9, and then basically we're going to launch, as the students move through, we're going to launch each year.
You're using the Second Life virtual world for modeling science, historical devices. And, you know, it's become a complex, somewhat problematic space for educators because of the fees the Lindens are charging being jacked up really substantially for educational users. And so some of us are turning towards open sims or other kinds of modeling structures. So I just was curious to know about your decision to engage with that virtual environment. And
it was a response from the kids. What did the kids want to do? And we just happened to be, you know, we could afford to do that particular. But you're right. I mean, the question is, but here's the thing. We're going to do that. It's a template for figuring this thing out, right? We'll be able to create we'll be able to create curriculum, best practices, prompting for teachers to facilitate that. Those are transferable to these other environments. And so really what you're doing is, how can kids create these societies? How can they translate these ideas in these role-played type experiences? And we're doing that at the no-tech level too. We're just costumes and cards. So in that way, if you can go to a platform where you can say, hey, here's all these tools, and here's a bunch of people that are doing it with these other tools, you know what? We can afford this one for our school, and but these practices apply. And maybe some of them don't, but some of them might be really helpful. All right, thank you so much.